Okay, we'll start with the essay on local food production. Experts throughout the world have debated the environmental and economic impacts of international. Okay, impact is generally used in the singular, it just sounds more natural. So I would say I've debated the environmental and economic impact of the international food supply chain, because you very much specified this chain, so the international. Some believe that consuming only regional food is the best way to deal with these problems. Personally, I strongly disagree. Okay. This essay will argue that the benefits of food imports and exports overcome their drawbacks. Okay, good. You've given a very clear thesis statement, which is good. All right. On the one hand, there is ample evidence that the food transport systems have negative, again I would use the singular, so that the food, and you say that, I would actually say, I would delete the here. So there's ample evidence that food transport systems have a negative impact on the environment. The primary reason behind this is twofold. Firstly, each type of food requires different types of transportation and distribution networks. Good sentence. Secondly, transport systems use unsustainable fuel. Good. For example, recent empirical research by the UK government demonstrated that 50% of all its air pollution comes from food transportation. Very good example. It must not be forgotten that only a few companies are actively implementing improvements in that area. Okay, very good. Okay. On the other hand, nations which have issues such as a shortage of water, you do need an article here, such as a shortage of water and infertile lands, are helped by other countries. This is largely because some nations that have extensive fertile territories produce enough food to supply internal and external demand. Good sentence. For instance, an extensive study by Oxford University showed that 30 nations from Africa and, okay, it should be, and the Middle East, not the East Middle, so, and the Middle East, are unable to produce even 10% of their own needed food. Okay, good. Thus, it is possible to state beyond doubt that importing and exporting food is critical to sustain critical to sustain the real international demand. Okay, good. From the arguments and examples given, I firmly believe that the consumption of food from international markets is of the absolute importance. Okay, again, a very clear viewpoint, which is good. In addition, they are vital to cope with the world hunger rate. Okay, I'd say in addition, it is vital to cope, and I wouldn't say world hunger rate, you could say to cope with world hunger and food shortages, something like that would sound better. Okay, good. Right, the positives on this is that you've given a very clear thesis statement and a clear conclusion, a clear viewpoint in your conclusion, and is being consistent, which is good. The only thing I would say is you've given this clear viewpoint that you strongly believe in the importance of importing food in international food transportation. But if you look at your essay as a whole, it's very balanced. You have two paragraphs which equally support two different arguments. So your argument in your second paragraph is actually arguing against your viewpoint. Your third paragraph is actually supporting your viewpoint. But if you look at these two paragraphs, they're totally balanced. So in other words, you're giving as much support for an opposing argument as you are for the argument that you should be supporting. Now, I want you to think about that. Normally, if you strongly believe something, which in this case you seem to, I would have expected more evidence and examples to support your particular viewpoint, as opposed to going to so much trouble to support an opposing viewpoint. I'm not saying you shouldn't include the a counter argument, and you need to consider both sides and show you understand both sides, so that is good. But I'm just talking about the weighting here. You've equally weighted your arguments, and yet, you know, the whole point of when you're writing an essay is you're answering a question, and you have answered that question. But what I'm saying is, when you answer a question, you need to support it. So I would make sure you put your more authority and more support for the argument that you actually believe in. Okay, so that's just one point, but otherwise I have to say, very well written, very clear, so well done. Okay, so let's have a look at this bar chart about chip manufacturers. The bar chart shows the number of manufactured chips from Intel and ADM sold in France over the year 2017. Good. Yes, it's a good introduction. Overall, Intel led the sales in 7 months, being June its peak. Okay, grammatically we need to change the your second phrase here. So overall, Intel led the sales in the first 7 months, with June being the peak. Okay. Or you could say overall Intel led the sales in the first 7 months, reaching a peak in June. Okay. But you can't say being June its peak. It's the word order is wrong there. It would be June being its peak. Okay. On the other hand, now I wouldn't use on the other hand here, because that's more used when you're introducing opposing arguments or viewpoints or positions, but here you're looking at facts. So I would say something like in contrast. Okay, so in contrast, this month was the lowest point of ADM sales. Okay, with that, now your last part is not, you haven't connected the last part of your sentence. Without any selling, is just hanging on the end of your sentence there. You need to connect it within the sentence. So this month was the lowest point of ADM sales, I think I would probably, instead of just putting it on the end, I'll try and include it in the sentence. So this month was the lowest point of ADM sales, with only zero sales in June. Okay. In the first semester, now again, I wouldn't use the word semester. Semester is more connected to education. Usually in business you would say quarter. So in the first quarter, the Intel sales registered an upward trend, okay, reaching its highest peak at 125,000 in June and its lowest at 30,000 in April. That's good. At the same time, ADM sales peaked at 120,000 in February. It's a little bit confusing, you're saying at the same time. In actual fact, you're talking about different times. Before was June and April, and now you're in February. So I wouldn't use that phrase at the same time. It's a bit misleading. ADM sales peaked at 120,000 in February, presenting fluctuations from, I wouldn't say presenting, I would just say fluctuating from 20,000 to 40,000 in the other 5 months. Okay, I'm not really clear why you've chosen 5 months, because this whole bar chart is talking about a year from January to December, and you're simply just saying their ADM sales reached a peak in February and fluctuated from 20,000 to 40,000 in the other 5 months. So which 5 months do you mean? Which 5 months of the year? You'd need to be more specific there. Okay. in the last quarter of the year, the Intel chip sales tripled to 75,000 between July and August, whereas the ADM chips sold dropped considerably from 110,000 to 45,000 in these months. Okay. In addition, the sales of chips from both companies declined moderately in September and October. Okay. Revealing significant discrepancies. I wouldn't use the word discrepancies. The discrepancy is when there's a mistake between figures. Something isn't quite right. I would just say revealing significant differences. The sales of Intel chips were 20 times and 3 times higher than the sales of ADM in November and December, respectively. Okay. Yes, overall, very good. You have summarized the information. Do be careful to be a little bit more specific at points, like when you mentioned in the other 5 months. I couldn't quite understand that when you're talking about a whole year here. Be careful of some of your vocabulary. Semester was not the right word. On the other hand, it didn't quite fit there as well. But generally very clear, so well done.